I'm Jody McMickle. I am an amateur historian of North American, Native American history and the conflicts with European immigrants, as well as an environmental conservationist. Today I'm discussing the concept of the Wendigo, which is a mythical being from the Algonquin Native American tribe. The Wendigo comes from the Algonquin Native American tribe, which the nation, they're one unit based on a common language, but it's comprised of many different tribes. The primary tribes, with reference to the Wendigo, are the Cree and the Ojibwa, because they have similar spiritual beliefs as well as the common language. And so the stories for Wendigo run very parallel between the two. But these Native Americans, they occupied a very large area of North America, from as far west as Minnesota to the east coast, up through Canada, and all the way down to Virginia. So it was a massive area, but a significant portion of it was in a subarctic climate. So in winters around the Hudson Bay and things like that, it got very, very harsh and cold, and food and resources became very scarce. So the myth of Wendigo comes from this harsh, cold, lack of resource environment. And the three character traits of Wendigo that stand out because of these circumstances are cannibalism, an insatiable appetite, and a physical and appetite growth that grows in proportion to their consumption. So this mythical being, like you can see, he was massively tall, and he had grotesque features, but no matter how much he ate, he was physically gaunt and always starving. He had an unquenchable thirst for human flesh. And the idea of this comes from this competition over food in winter, and the idea or the fear of the Native Americans that the lack of food would resort to famine cannibalism, which happened sometimes, when people would die in the harsh environment, they would resort to eating the dead to survive the winter, or if they were trapped somewhere, because these were hunter-gatherer tribes that moved with the food, and they would get, stuck in somewhere with the weather and run out of food, and then they would consume each other, the dead people, to stay alive. And so they had this fear over scarcity of resources and food, and so they create this myth to kind of warn the people in their community that this happens. And so they make these stories about staying out of the woods, and don't go wandering and get lost, because somebody's going to eat you up. Or another factor of it is that the Wendigo can either possess you or infect you, and then you take on these character traits. You become insane and hungry for flesh and go and eat your whole family. And it's an actual, real physical, psychological issue in the history. It's called a Wendigo psychosis, and it's a medically documented thing that happened during the fur trading era of the 17th and 18th century in Northern America. The first written accounts were during this period of fur trade in North America. Europeans immigrated into the United States, and they were just harvesting any resource they could, all the lumber, all the fur. The French through Canada, down through Pittsburgh. If they could kill it, they killed it, and they sold the furs. And there were thousands of clashes between Native Americans and these fur traders over these resources. Many scholars attribute the origin of the Wendigo to this competition for food and resources. So my modern day social problem and how I relate it to the Wendigo is the residential and urban development within Anne Arundel County, which creates this consumption or loss of natural resources and disruption of ecosystems within the area, and it perpetually grows. I interviewed, her name is Margaret Kai Ziegler, and she is the administrator of Geological Information Science and Research at Anne Arundel County Planning and Zoning. And she said that over the last 20 to 30 years, the county has continually grown at a rate of about 2%, and is currently increased, but they're not expecting it to increase to 3%. So they're saying somewhere between 2.5% to 2.8%. Currently, now, the county has a population of 580,000 people. So in the next 5 years, you're looking at almost just under 600,000 people.
I didn't realize Anne Arundel was so large.
Yeah. So this is a map of the county, and these are the zoning areas, and I don't know why you can't see it so well on here.
We can
see it there, but basically all of this light green area is currently zoned as agricultural areas. The only areas that are green spaces or not used for residential, urban, or commercial areas are these really dark green spots. And it's essentially just this area here, which is the Patuxent River watershed basin. It's swampland. They can't use it to build stuff on because it's too wet. And that's essentially, the only green spaces are around the waterways. And those are the only areas that are really not expected to become zoned for some sort of use. Over the next 5 years, with the population growth, these agricultural lands will get rezoned as residential because all of these other colors, like every other color on the map aside from dark green and light green, are already residential or commercial areas. The gray is the city of Annapolis.
What is the purple, Jody?
I didn't print out the whole key, but essentially if it's not light green or dark green, it's developed. So yeah, the dark green is the undeveloped wetlands, and those spaces, one, are not ideal to build anything on, and two, the state requires them to protect those areas for the health of the Chesapeake Bay. So if the county could do something with it, they might consider it, but the state won't let them. So, but all of the other colors are in some form residential, urban, or commercially zoned areas. There are some areas, like the housing plan that's coming up next to me, that are considered low density. That means you're limited to the amount of people that can live in that space. But across the street from me is high density apartments And, you know, so you can file a variance with the county and have them, you know, get approval to zone your project for whatever you want, essentially. But with the loss of these areas being zoned for residential, as people continue to move into the county, you're running into environmental factors like surface runoff and water issues like those seen in Ellicott City. Now, these type of issues are planned for in the initial planning of developments. But what happens is the science changes, new information comes to light. So the county spends a very large amount of money retrofitting old projects. So you have a project, you're building it to their specifications, but then they realize, oh, it's poisoning the Chesapeake Bay, we can't do that anymore. Now we have to have closed water runoff areas and things like that. So then the county has to foot the bill to retrofit all of these open water, you know, when you go past the mall or whatever and they have these ponds with the fountains, that's all water runoff from parking lots and things like that. And now they're realizing that those aren't ideal because they collect chemicals and they're mosquito breeding grounds and other things like that. And so now they're doing away with it. So the housing area next to me, they have to have underground, all closed water runoff areas.